Today I'm going to go through one of my favorite games from the Chess Candidates Tournament. The first game today that I'm going to go over is Liren versus Wang in the first round. Liren starts with c4, playing the English opening. I'm going to run through some of these basic opening moves pretty quick, because they're just not as instructive. So, White wants to attack Black's bishop and try to trade it off for the knight, because Grandmasters, they really prefer bishops, its long-range power, over the knights. But Black finds a way to save their bishop. Okay, just some normal developing moves. And here Black is just putting pressure on this b4 pawn. So pushes it, get it out of there, takes it, moves his knight off of the edge of the board into a better place. And so White's like, we'll trade our worst knight for the opponent's more centralized knight. And here's the first really interesting move of the game that I found. So just take a second and think, what would you play if you were White? Alright, White plays a4, and this is seems like a pretty small move, but it's pretty important, because if White doesn't play that move, like let's say White just makes another random move, like moves the queen here, then Black can play a4, and just look at this pawn. It's completely isolated. It's socially distanced, and it'll probably get taken eventually out in no man's land. So the first lesson is Grandmasters really like to connect their pawns, and now this pawn is strong and controlling some of the opponent's territory. Continues. Both sides get their pieces out, and knight is pinned here, so it doesn't want that knight to stay pinned. She tries to push the bishop back. Bishop just remains on that diagonal, so we move the queen out of the pin. And again, Grandmasters like bishops over knights. Black Wang Hao is not looking to just take that knight. Alright, so this is the next move that's pretty instructive. So just take a second and try to think, why would White want to move their knight back here? The reason is pretty simple. Just look at this bishop. It's stuck behind its own pawns here and here. So this bishop is just not doing much. Black's bishop is better. So one really important concept is that a bishop behind your own pawns, like a light squared bishop behind light squared pawns, is called a bad bishop. While this bishop here for Black is considered a good bishop because all of Black's pawns are on dark squares. So Black's light squared bishop isn't as hemmed in by his own pawns. So it's a really common idea for Grandmasters to try to exchange their bad minor piece for their opponent's good minor piece. So that's why Liren decided to move his knight to d2 here, so he can eventually move this bishop to f3 and try to force an exchange. So we'll see that in action soon. And now this is the next really interesting move. You would think that you want to keep your knight in the center of the board, and in general it's not a good idea to move your pieces back to the back rank. But there's a really interesting idea that Wang Hao has. Strong players, they're always looking for ways they can maneuver their pieces into better squares. Take a second and think about, where do you think that knight is trying to go in a few moves. What's Black's plan? Black's plan is to Black probably noticed this weak d4 square. So this square, as you can see, is not controlled by any of White's pawns. You know, it's called a hole. It's like a hole, or and this square is already supported by 2 of Black's pawns. So wouldn't it just be amazing if we had a knight right here, just dominating a lot of squares in White's position? There we go. So the whole idea is that eventually this knight, can make its way into that square. So following on the previous idea, we want to exchange those bishops. Black doesn't want to take it, and he decides to develop his queen instead. So make an aggressive move, push the queen back, and now White wants to force the issue. Remember, in chess it's always important to count. Now Black's bishop is being attacked twice. 1, 2. When pieces are in the same line, you add their attacking power. So this queen and this bishop are both attacking Black's bishop, and it's only defended once. So 2 attackers, 1 defender, we're threatening to win the bishop for free. So that's how we force the trade. Alright, and another idea is with trades is, you know, just think for a second to yourself, why would White offer this queen trade? If the Black queen takes and we take back, remember this knight I was talking about?
So now the knight can no longer get out on its way to d4 because the pawn blocks both of the squares. So knight stuck.
Strong players are always looking for ways they can eliminate their opponent's piece's mobility. And so always think twice, you know, how will the position change when you're offered a trade? Just don't make trades by reflex. So Black doesn't make that trade. Instead, we're going to attack this weak pawn with our rook, develop it from the corner, and attack a backwards pawn. So you can see how this pawn can't be defended by any other pawn, so it's a natural weakness in the position, and grandmasters love to attack those. White just goes ahead and decides to exchange. We take with the knight, finally getting it out. Game continues. And this is a key move. F4, this last move by White, is the move that lost White the game. Go through it. So we're gonna take, and now Black has a really subtle but really important move that basically allows Black to win the game. So just take a few seconds, just guess what you think Black might do. What I want you guys to notice is we've exchanged lots of pieces, so we're kind of in the endgame phase. We have a dark squared bishop. A dark squared bishop can only attack pawns that are on dark squares. So Wang has the genius idea of making sure most of Black's pawns are fixed on dark squares, so we can keep attacking them with our bishop and win them. So with that in mind, what do you think the move is? The move is f5. So at first, this is a little hard to find because you're like, hey, can't we just take the pawn? But taking the pawn is a really bad idea. So, okay, white won a pawn, but look at all of white's pawns now. They're all isolated, none of them guard each other, they're stacked on top of each other. They're going to easily be taken down. So by winning one pawn, we killed the rest of our pawns effectively. Black pushes the pawn instead. And now, look, all of these pawns are on dark squares that our bishop can attack. And you can see like this h5 pawn in particular is easily attacked by our bishop, by black's bishop, and it's going to be a pain to defend it in the corner there. So that was the whole, and that's why this move earlier was right here. This is why this f4 move was not the best move, because after you trade, this is all forced, and now you fix the pawns. We want to move our rook here, and eventually get our rook into g4 and attack these weak pawns. And now that these weak pawns are stuck here, there isn't much white can do about it. So he moves his king to avoid the check, but our rook is in a really good spot now. Moves the knight to attack this. This knight was just attacking this pawn. We're just going to defend it. Alright, now like I mentioned earlier, we're going to attack these weak pawns that are on dark squares. And then gets his rook into a more active position, but he's pushed back. Now finally win that pawn. And this is the next incredible move. Rooks are worth more than knights, but black is just willing to sacrifice the rook. So this is, the final most instructive moment of the game. And the reason is that you'll see in a moment what happens. White is hesitant to take the rook, but he has to eventually. And now when we take back, look at these two pawns. So these two pawns are known as connected pass pawns. So these two pawns can't be stopped by any of white's pawns, and they're connected so they defend each other. So they're basically going to march down the board and promote to a queen, winning the game eventually. And it's just not possible to stop when you have two connected pass pawns really close to promoting that can be supported by our rook and our bishop. And so there you go. And at this point, white just gave up here. He knows there's no way to just stop these pawns from rolling down the board. It's really important to think about which pawn you should take with. If you take with the h pawn, then you don't have those two outside pawns. Like if you take here, that's a mistake. Always think about with your pawns which way to capture, and if you can force a situation where you have two pawns that are connected and that are past your opponent's pawns, that's worth a lot of times giving up in exchange for.